this is going to be a very stupid idea. I do not know much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, admittedly, but I do know enough that I feel that I can accurately describe the characters that I know of how good they stretch before a battle. So I'm going to be focusing more on characters that we have seen actively fighting somebody in combat in some way, shape, or form. And I'm focusing mostly on the characters that I actually know a little bit of. Like I've seen them in movies or TV shows or something like that. So let's start off with Tony Stark. So obviously he doesn't need to stretch, I would say. I'm going to count his suit as being his power. So I'm going to say that he probably doesn't need to stretch. Because, I mean, he might need to, but I would imagine that the suit takes a pretty, like most of the attack power that's getting hit at him. So I'm going to say that he's probably low on the doesn't need to stretch, because he probably should, but I imagine he would not. Next up, Steve. He, I think, technically doesn't need to stretch necessarily, but I would imagine that he understands the importance of it, and so I think that he would actually take the time before battle to stretch. Bruce Banner, I don't think he's a warrior of the mind. I think in my original concept for this tier list, I had him as, I had an entire section dedicated to warriors of the mind, where they're not really using, their bodies to fight people. But I guess, technically, Bruce Banner does need to stretch, but I would imagine that he doesn't. He just kind of hulks out, and I don't think the Hulk would need to stretch, so I'm gonna put him under doesn't need to stretch because of his powers. But specifically Bruce Banner, he's a warrior of the mind. He's not on the battlefield, for the record. Natasha obviously stretches. She's one of the only smart characters in the entirety of the MCU, so obviously she's going to take the time before battle to stretch. Conversely, the Winter Soldier, I think, does not know what stretching is. Both of them, very heavily trained assassins, but two different ends of the spectrum. Two very different ends over here. I don't think that the Winter Soldier knows what stretching is. I think that they wiped that from his memory, just like everything else. Alternatively, I think that Bucky Barnes does stretch. I don't think he does. I'm actually going to shuffle these around a little bit if I can, because I think Natasha is the only one that actively stretches. These two, they probably don't need to stretch because of their superhuman abilities, but I think they would anyways. You know, something about them being in the war. I think they would have learned the importance of a good stretch before battle. So I think these two are smart enough to stretch. The Winter Soldier doesn't know what stretching is, though, for the record. Very important distinction there. Alright, and I think we're gonna get most of the godlike abilities out of the way, because Thor and Vision, I think, do not need to stretch. If I had to say one of them would stretch, I would probably say Thor, but I think he would do it just because he thinks that it's like a fun communal thing to do between friends. More than anything, Vision doesn't need to stretch at all, I don't think. He's an entire computer in a fabricated body. He knows he doesn't need to stretch, but he would encourage the rest of the team to stretch. That's my thought. Alright, Sam Wilson, admittedly, I don't know much about him. I've only seen him in a couple of things, and I haven't actually seen the new Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I haven't seen the TV show, and I have not seen the new Captain America movie. So I don't know much about him, but I feel like he is kind of in the same vein of these people, where like, you know, that military background kind of, you know, they're smart enough at that point that they would probably stretch at least a little bit. Who am I gonna do next? I can do Hawkeye. That bitch is not stretching. I don't know much about Hawkeye as well, but from what little I know of the comics, that bitch is not stretching at all before battle. You know? I can imagine him doing it in like his free time, but before a battle he's not doing shit. And up there with him is, I think, who am I going to pick next? I think most of the Guardians of the Galaxy are in the same boat as him. Peter is not stretching whatsoever. I think, you know, Groot doesn't need to either. Drax, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know what stretching is. He would probably try and make, like, you know, he's a classic himbo. That bitch does not know what stretching is, for the record. As opposed to Nebula and Gamora, I think Nebula and Gamora, they're smart enough to stretch. I don't think, do I want to change Nebula? Because I think she's got enough cybernetic, like, alterations done to her. I don't think she would need to stretch necessarily, but I think she might still. But Gamora definitely stretches. Rocket does not stretch, and I'm pretty sure Mantis would not know what stretching is either. Another in the doesn't need to stretch because of their powers, I would say Spider-Man. First of all, he's a teenager. What teenager stretches? They don't need to, first of all. Their spines have not been so utterly destroyed. Second of all, he has healing abilities, I'm pretty sure. So he wouldn't even get sore muscles or bones or anything like that he would need to stretch. And I think that he is like, he's naturally flexible and like hypermobile or something. So I don't think he would need to stretch necessarily. Another one that I don't think would need to stretch is Loki, but I don't think he would be he's in the same vein of Banner, I think. Because he's not necessarily a fighter, he's more of a warrior of the mind, but in a very different way. He manipulates his way out of things more often than actually like picking up a knife, you know? So that's my take on him. I would also say, I think Doctor Strange is kinda in the same vein. I'm gonna put him beside Bruce Banner. You know, we're gonna put these three beside each other because these three, I think, are really just, they don't need to stretch because they are not really using their bodies necessarily. I mean, I guess Bruce Banner technically, again, you know, the Hulk, different thing, person, something. So I think, like, these three, they are more warriors of the mind. You know, they're off battle most of the time. And Doctor Strange, he can, like, manipulate the world or something, so he doesn't need to stretch, I think. In that same argument, I think Wanda doesn't need to stretch because, again, she's more of, like, magical abilities. So we're gonna count her in the doesn't need to stretch because of powers. Because again, she's more of like a warrior of the mind, you know, using her magic and abilities to get by. Conversely, her brother Pietro, I don't know where I got Peter from. Pietro, I think he does not stretch, personally. I think if we are talking X-Men Pietro, I think he might. I don't know enough about the admittedly, I've not seen any of the X-Men movies, I don't think, or at least if I have, it's been a very, very long time, but I want to say that MCU Pietro doesn't stretch, but he should, but I think that X-Men Pietro would stretch. He either stretches, or he doesn't know what stretching is. That's two options for X-Men Pietro. Now, next up, we're gonna do Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think that both of them actually would be smart enough to stretch. What's that? There's a really great news article or something like that where it's, oh, what is it? It's a guy going to rob a bank or like a gas station or something, and he is caught on the video footage stretching beforehand. That's Scott to me. Like he's smart enough, I would say, personally. And I think that he would, in fact, stretch before every burglary. Conversely, I don't know much about Carol, but I would put her up here. She is pretty overpowered, I would say, in a lot of ways. So I don't think she necessarily would need to stretch. I don't know if I would go so far as to call her godlike, though, is the thing. I think I'm gonna put her there just because I think she is super powerful. So she's on the very low end of doesn't need to stretch because she's godlike, you know? She's very, very close to the doesn't need to stretch because of her powers kind of thing, you know? She's too much of an icon. What else do you want from me? Well, I guess we'll get all the Marvels out of the way. I don't know much about Monica. I think her name's Photon. But she seems like she would be the type of person to stretch. I think her mom is Carol's girlfriend in Captain Marvel. The other pilot from like the 90s or something. So I think her mom would teach her well. So I think she would, in fact, stretch before a battle. I don't know if she needs to, though. So I might need to change her into doesn't need to stretch because of her powers. Possibly. I think I'm gonna put her in here. So if I remember correctly, she's made of like light particles or something. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't actually know that much about her, I will admit. But I think she doesn't need to stretch because of her powers. Next up, I'm gonna do Kamala. She does not stretch. She's like 15. Again, what 15-year-old do you know is stretching? Because I know some 15-year-olds, and I was a 15-year-old, and none of them are stretching. Or at least not regularly. She might start stretching. I feel like when she was like a little bit older, she might start stretching. But I think as it stands right now, she is not. I guess we'll go get most of the TV shows out of the way. Mark Spector, I can say this for certain because now that I have gone through the process of reading the comics, and I can say with absolute certainty, this bitch is not stretching. I don't care if he's had a military background, I don't care what you try and tell me, this bitch is not stretching. He does not take care of himself. His ass does not take care of himself, alright? For the record, quite frankly, he is not taking care of himself. Conversely, Steven would stretch, I think. He is the only bitch in there that's taking any care of them. So I think that he would take the time before every battle to take a few minutes, even just a few minutes. I think literally in the TV show, he literally takes like a minute during battle to fix his outfit, and if you think that same person wouldn't take a few minutes beforehand to stretch, you are quite frankly wrong. And then finally, of course, my boy Jake Lockley, he doesn't even know what stretching is. He is, in comics, he's literally just a cabbie man. So I don't think he needs to stretch before battle necessarily, because he's rarely in battle, first of all. But even in the TV show, if we're talking specifically the MCU, in the TV show, he just shoots people with a gun. Honestly, iconic of him. Love that for him. He does not need to stretch, and he doesn't even know what that is, quite frankly. Layla, God bless her. She does stretch, I think. I'm tempted to put her into the what is stretching category, but I don't think that's really quite accurate to her as a person, as a character. I think she's smarter than that. You know? I'm gonna shuffle her a little bit over. I think she stretches more than Steven, quite frankly. Finally, T'Challa. I think that he doesn't need to stretch because A, the suit, and B, the powers that he has. I don't know how much his powers come from the suit and how much comes from like the little concoction they give him. But I feel like he doesn't need to stretch all that much. I moved Monica over here just because I think she probably doesn't need to stretch the most out of all of these. But yeah, no, I don't think T'Challa would have stretched. Shuri, on the other hand, she doesn't know what stretching is. Again, teenage girl. I think she's a young adult, I think, by the time she becomes the Black Panther. She's not stretching, though. She has not learned anything from watching her brother get beat to a pulp, alright? For the record. She is not stretching at all. On top of that, I think that Jessica Jones, I've only seen a bit of her TV show, she's not stretching. I don't think she knows what stretching is, honestly, but she's in pretty good company, I think. Neither is Matt Murdock. He's not stretching. I know enough about his character by now that I feel confident in saying this bitch does not take care of himself at all. It's something about the Catholic guilt that does it to him, I think. I want to say. Just, you know, personally speaking. That's probably what's going on. And then Shang-Chi. I don't remember what his sister is named, but they're both relatively trained in martial arts, so I think they know the importance of stretching. And there you go. There you have it.